Now, the plan by Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe to import Russian oil has been met with a wall of ridicule. Opposition parties say not only does South Africa lack capacity to refine oil, but the exchange rate is woefully unfavourable. They also fear that the country may well be in breach of sanctions imposed by the West on Moscow for its February invasion of neighbour Ukraine. Joining us now to elaborate on their position is DA Shadow Mineral Resources and Energy Minister Kevin Mileham. And for a wider picture on where we are on this particular matter, we're also joined by Fund Manager and Analyst Peter Major. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you so much for your time and for joining us tonight here on In Focus. From what I hear, the Minister has officially tabled this proposal for consideration. I don't know how far it is in those particular processes. But Kevin, as you have clearly made it known that there are four elements or components that make up our fuel price. It's the basic fuel price itself, it's taxes and levies, it's the retail and wholesale margins, as well as storage and distribution costs at this particular time. With the available discount, many saying it probably could even be sitting at 25 to 27% on the dated Brent crude. Why should South Africa not buy it?
Well, good evening and good evening to your viewers. The first thing is that buying that crude makes absolutely no difference to the fuel price in South Africa. So you're quite right about how the basic fuel or how the fuel price is made up, the four elements. But the key component of that is the basic fuel price. And that is a price determined by the minister, and it's based on a price of refined product from the Mediterranean and Singapore. So it doesn't matter whether or not we buy Russian crude, because we're still basing our price on refined costs from Europe and the Southeast Asian area. That's the first issue. The second is that we have absolutely no way of refining it. We have one refinery that is capable of refining crude oil in South Africa at the moment. The other three have shut down. Our biggest refinery, Sapref, shut down in March. So right now, South Africa has no way of handling this crude oil from Russia or from anywhere, really.
Now, Peter, some are looking at this and saying, well, this is an unadministered type of crude oil that we would get. In other words, it's not regulated, so we could possibly see some kind of improvement at the pumps, bringing the price to as low as 14 or 15 rands per litre of petrol. How true is that? Peter, that's for you.
Oh, sorry.
I thought you were talking to another Peter. You know what? I'm looking way beyond, are we even going to get this oil? You know, do we want to deal with a pariah state? One of the reasons apartheid floundered in the new government, the new democratic government, was able to take place was the South Africans, the National Party, they were tired of being a pariah state. You know, they were tired of dealing under the cover, cloak and dagger. They were buying oil at a premium. You know, people weren't allowed to sell oil here. So it's like we almost want to go back to the pariah status. Do we want to deal with pariah states? And what's really in it for us? We're so used to politicians making outlandish statements that you have to ask yourself, even though Mr. Mantashe probably has the record for making outlandish statements, you have to say, why would he announce he's going to buy pariah oil or rogue country oil at a discount? Why not just buy it, not tell anybody? And, you know, you'd probably get it even cheaper. But advertising it is actually helping the Russian political campaign. It's helping their PR. So, as Kevin pointed out, we can't even refine it. So are we going to go in the trading business? You know, are we going to buy Russian oil at a supposed discount and then on-sell it at a higher price? And we don't have a good history of buying oil, because remember what happened last time we had a big oil scandal here? We were selling oil at the bottom of the cycle for something like $15 a barrel when it was trading for 25. I mean, it's just crazy. Every time South Africa deals in oil, it loses huge amounts of money. Under the national government it did, and now do we want to repeat it with the current government?
Yeah.
So it's hard to answer this intelligently, because it just doesn't make any sense.
It's been asked, what's the motivation here? And I suppose, unlike India, who have come outright and said the motivation is not political, the motivation is economic. And the finance minister there saying, well, if there is a lucrative case of economic opportunism here that I can take advantage of, why not? So if we say the motivation is not political, but the motivation is, of course, looking at a deal strategically that could improve our situation following the pandemic and the global growth slowdown, would this be a good deal?
Can you the country on opportunism? You know, what happened to the South Africa in 1994 that was going to run a country on principles? You know, principles are foundations. You can't just bend and change your principles, because the whole superstructure, the whole edifice, the whole skyscraper is built on the foundation. So if we've got a foundation that underpins our Constitution, are we now going to say, well, it's time to be opportunistic? We will buy oil from anybody if it's going to lead to lower oil prices or lower petrol prices. But I would love to see how that happens, because we're not going to refine it ourselves. And what is the discount? Because do we believe things our politicians tell us? When they sold that oil at 15 a barrel and said, oh, we were rotating stock and we're going to buy it back cheaper, well, we didn't. We bought it back at 25, 30. So they must follow through. If they want to make a big statement like this and step outside the border of principles and say we're doing this to be opportunistic, then they must show us how this is going to help the average South African. Because I haven't heard this government say much, and I've seen them do even little that helps the average South African. The average South African needs jobs.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't care what the petrol price is if he doesn't have a job.
Right.
So I just think this is some kind of smokescreen, and I don't know what it's supposed to lead to.
Could I come in on this?
Kevin, yes, you can. You can come in here.
I absolutely agree with what Peter's saying about it being a smokescreen. It's a complete red herring by the minister. First of all, as I've indicated, we don't have the refining capacity. Secondly, it doesn't affect our fuel price in the slightest. It would be very, very different if we were a country like India where the fuel price is unregulated. Also, it would be very different if we were a country like India that has massive refining capacity, which we don't. So the proposal by the minister doesn't solve the problem at the pumps. It doesn't solve the cost of living problem that the average South African faces. So it is a red herring. Now, there are solutions that have been put forward, and my party has put solutions on the table which have been poo-pooed by the minister. And I think that we need to go and relook them. Amongst those solutions are to do away with some of the taxes that we have on fuels, to address the road accident fund levy, to deregulate our fuel sector and allow competition into the sector. Those would be constructive steps that the minister could take in the short term to address the fuel price. Yeah. But buying Russian crude, and let me be clear here, there's nothing preventing South Africa buying Russian crude. We don't have sanctions against Russia.
Yes. And there are no secondary sanctions also on countries who are doing business with Russia at this particular point, yes.
No, there aren't.
Yeah.
So there's nothing preventing it except for the fact that it would probably worsen our relations with the rest of the world. And that's something that we can ill afford at this stage.
Yeah. The other question, of course, being raised also by Peter to an extent in terms of our handling of oil, is that we did, I think we did, or at least it was reported that we did, liquidate a portion of our strategic crude oil reserves to make up that 6 billion rands hole that we apparently had plugged to give a discount. Would this not be an appropriate time to replenish those reserves, Kevin? And I'll get Peter as well to weigh in on that.
Absolutely. If you can buy cheap, you buy cheap. But that doesn't address the fuel price problem. If we're talking fuel prices, we can't be talking about buying crude to keep the fuel prices down. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. Peter, would this be a good thing to do? I mean, we are seeing already some countries beefing up their strategic crude oil reserves. America is also talking of doing the same. China is certainly doing the same. India is certainly doing the same. If you look at how much crude oil they've been buying from Russia from February, we know that having that kind of reserve is great for mitigating impact of rising fuel prices in some instances, mitigate the price at the pumps, and also it's a valuable tool to protect the economy as well as consumers from future supply disruptions. So for that reason, or for those reasons, would we be in a good position to take advantage of a 20% or maybe even more discount?
No, we're not in a good position to, because we have a horrible track record of taking good positions that benefit the country. Every time we see government is taking a position, there's some kind of scam involved. And we are not oil traders. You know, we are commodity producers. I'm not even sure we're good commodity traders, because every time we tried hedging the gold price in the late 80s, early 90s, we lost money. In fact, we lost so much money that P.W. Buddha actually banned us selling gold forward, because he thought it was some kind of scam where the companies were intentionally getting money out of the country. Now, they were getting money out of the country, but it was unintentionally and was giving it to the wrong people. But I think it was one of the few good acts that P.W. Buddha did. He banned gold trading. He said you sell at the spot price. That's it, period. And yes, for this government with its track record to say we're going to start speculating in the oil market and beefing up reserves, please, we're beefing up reserves now at $120 oil price. And what's the long-term average of oil? 50? So we're going to start buying oil at the top to beef up our reserves. And so when the oil falls down to 50, we can say, oh, well, we bought at 100. It's just, none of this makes sense, and there is precedent for this. Everything the minister has said and intimated, there is precedence that it's some kind of scam and that it costs this country more money. And our debt is the biggest component of our budget. Interest payments are going to be crippling here with interest rates going up. We don't need to be gambling. Gamblers always come short. And now you got government gambling even more with our money, speculating on oil. The whole thing's crazy. And I think it's some kind of PR exercise. I don't know if Putin is paying Mr. Mantashe to say this to try and show the world that sanctions aren't hurting Russia, that there's a way around it. But there's something sinister about this, because it just makes no sense.
Let's take a break, and we ask you the question: if it's available and it's at a discount, should we buy it? What are your thoughts? 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us at Newzroom405. In Focus continues shortly. Back tonight on In Focus, DA's Kevin Mileham still with us, as well as fund manager Peter Major, and we are discussing, of course, this proposal, which I believe the minister would have tabled, and certainly will be up for discussion, of course, in July. We are set to be up for another fuel price hike, and maybe even with the inflation now hitting a five-year high of 6.5%, maybe we could be facing another interest rate hike. So these are questions that many people are asking, saying especially since inflation is being driven by fuel, Kevin, this could be a way to go. But I hear you're making a case that it's not workable because we don't have refineries. Others are arguing that, well, one, we must be strategic in replenishing our fuel supply, but two, this certainly could encourage us in fixing our refining capacity. Is that workable?
Look, I think the issue with refining capacity in South Africa has two dimensions to it. The first is that our refineries are old and are no longer up to the standards of the mega refineries that are currently operating in China and India and places like that. That's the first issue. The second is there still a business case for those refineries? Do they still make money for their owners and operators? And that's something that you'd have to take up with the private companies that operate those refineries. I think the issue of resupplying or restocking our strategic reserve is an interesting one, because the question has to be asked, should we be stocking crude oil or should we be stocking refined product? And obviously there are additional costs with stocking refined product, but it would go a long way towards cushioning the blow if we had refined fuels available to release into the market when the price spiked.
Yeah. And what's keeping us from doing that?
Well, as I said, there are additional costs and technical implications in the way that they are stored, but South Africa hasn't taken the necessary steps. You know, in 2007 there was, or about 2006, 2007, there was a fuel crisis in South Africa where there was a shortage. and there was a commission of inquiry under then Judge Morane to determine what needed to be done, and that commission of inquiry issued the Morane report. And one of the things it said is that we need to store refined products. We need to have a 90-day cover of refined fuel.
That's right.
We don't have that in South Africa.
Yeah. Where are we sitting right now? I think at some point we were talking 10 million barrels, which by mathematics means we only had 10 days. And we need to be sitting at 90 days. So I don't know whether we are at that 10 million or we have replenished further than that. What do you know from where you're sitting?
I don't have an update, but we sold 6 million barrels to cover the levy subsidy, and to call it a subsidy is actually misleading. To reduce the amount of corruption tax that the government was putting on fuel. So we sold 6 million barrels. I'm not sure what the latest state of our fuel reserves are. I don't have that information.
All right. Peter, what could possibly be the consequence of, as you put it, this undesirable siding with Russia as far as this particular matter is concerned?
I think there's a lot of consequences. First of all, let's look at the economics. Let's find out, what does discounted Russian oil say? Because when I go downtown and I see for sale signs and I run in to buy clothes, I often come home and I find out I paid above what the normal price was. You know, just because somebody puts a red sign up that says for sale discount, do you know you're getting a discount? So I would like the government to show us, what are we paying for this crude oil? And then what are we doing with it? We can't refine it. We can't put it in our trucks. So we're having to now send this crude oil to somebody else who's going to refine it. What are they going to charge us to refine it? And then what are they going to charge us to send the refined product down here? You know, storage, transport. So that's the economic side. And yeah, the economic side better damn well cancel out the political fallout. Because whether we like the West or not, we're still pretty dependent on them. You know, financially, aid, trade. So if we're going to go out of our way to poke them in the eye, to show them that we're diehard Marxists and we will always side with the Marxist part of the world instead of the capitalist West, fine. But let's just think, does that help our people here? And you don't have to be a fan of Frederick the Great, the leader that put Prussia together from a bunch of tiny little warring states. But if you look at the history of Frederick the Great, whatever he did, he says, how does this benefit my people? Sometimes he went to war. Sometimes he laid down and let people walk on him. Sometimes he gave in. Sometimes he didn't. Everything he did was for the benefit of his people, and he grew that country. He made it solid, strong. He increased the living standards. So, yeah, I don't think that's a bad role model. If there's a way of buying this crude and without bending our principles, and I don't think there is, but if it benefits the people, but let's be honest and cover the whole spectrum. How does buying Russian crude, when the West has massive sanctions against this country like we haven't ever seen since World War II for pretty good reasons, I would think, how is it helping this country? And why does Mr. Mantashe want to advertise it before he's even done it?
Yeah.
You know,
maybe it's helping the world. Maybe it's helping the globe. Maybe it's helping change the dynamics. One of the arguments is that buying this crude oil, will be buying it in rubles. It will prop up the ruble, maybe undermine the dollar and the dollar-based financial system and turn this thing upside down.
Look, I think that's... So here's the problem. Russia's invasion of Ukraine was an act of aggression against a sovereign nation. That's the simple fact of the matter. Whether or not they try and justify it as peacekeeping or a special operation or however you want to justify it, it doesn't actually play in the global market. It was an unjustified invasion of a sovereign nation. And if we're trying to prop up the Russian economy and try to prop up the Russian government by buying Russian oil, I have a huge problem with that.
The other question, and I know you're raising this issue of refining. I did raise this with one of the directors at the Department of Mineral Resources in my conversation with them, I think earlier this week, if not last week. They said it's not just the crude oil that they will be buying. They will be also buying some refined product from Russia, which they say they will be getting at a discount. Will that make any difference?
Well, the South African government is not a fuel wholesaler. It doesn't sell fuel to the retailers. It doesn't affect the pump price. The fuel price is determined centrally by the Central Energy Fund and the Minister of Energy. And as I indicated, the basic fuel price is not determined by the price of Russian oil or the price of Russian refined product. It's determined by the price of refined product in the Mediterranean and the refined product in Singapore. So I think this is a complete red herring. It's not going to sort out the pump price.
The only way, you say, is to get rid of the tax and the levies. You think you'll be successful in that proposal?
Well, we've got more than 135,000 South Africans who've signed a petition saying that this is the right thing to do. We've got some of the biggest road freight and transport companies on our side. We've got large sectors of the taxi industry supporting our proposals. So, yeah, I think there is a strong outcry from the South African people to address this issue. The question is whether or not government will heed that call and whether or not we will actually see any movement from a rather intransigent Minister Mantashe and Minister Gwede, who promised a couple of months ago, at the beginning of April, when the fuel prices first spiked, they promised a comprehensive review of the fuel pricing model. We still haven't seen anything from them.
Peter, final word from you. If South Africa does then take a harder line on Russia, many are saying, what will be the benefit?
I'm not even saying take a harder line, but the last time we bought discounted oil, it was either when America went into Iraq, and hey, I wasn't for that. I'm not sure that was justified, but, we got labeled because we were caught buying Iraqi oil, and I think we got caught a couple times buying Iranian oil. So in a way, the precedent's been set. South Africa has no problem buying oil from pariah countries or from countries that are being sanctioned or otherwise banned. But again, I just say, what's the benefit to the country? Is this payback? Is it one political party paying back another political party? And who are the middlemen? It's always important to see who are the traders and the middlemen in this kind of deal. Because if we haven't lived through enough of that, as the Zondo Commission has shown, we know the less government's involved in, the better. Government's supposed to be a referee. They're not supposed to be a player. And for them buying oil, trading oil, and telling us they're getting it at a discount, I'm just really cynical when I hear about discounts and governments doing it for the best. Just show us the numbers and show us that you got a plan. Not just a one-off opportunistic deal to get some PR from Mr. Putin.
Peter Major, Kevin Mileham. Let's hear what you have to say tonight on Twitter. Osama from Dundee in KwaZulu-Natal. Mr. Mantashe, buying cheap Russian oil isn't going to make a big difference at the pumps. Stop taking the nation for fools. Sipho Malachi in Mpumalanga saying, yes, it's the right move for what the minister is planning to do because it's not about politics but our economy. I thank you tonight for your views, sharing those on WhatsApp, and thanks to our panel, Peter Major, as well as Kevin Mileham.